Welcome to the News Desk, and in this edition we look at how the UK government is once again making a total dog's dinner of the transition to a renewable energy future. The EV benefit in kind company car incentive that makes salary sacrifice a no-brainer is doing virtually nothing to reduce airborne pollution. The EV public charging policies and regulations due to come into force on 24th of November this year, 2024, are likely to have unforeseen consequences that might end up doing far more harm than good, causing the loss of thousands of existing fast, rapid and ultra-rapid chargers across the country and accompanying massive price rises. I'm Dave, this is Dave Takes It On. Well, big thank you to all our viewers that have helped us reach 3 million views and over 12,000 subscribers. If you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. It does make such a difference to a small channel like ours. Well, a shout out here to Gary Croft, whom we met recently at Aldi while filming. I didn't recognise him at first, as he is now driving a bright red Smart Brava, which looked a gorgeous EV. If any of our viewers has an interesting EV and is willing to allow us to film it for the channel, please get in touch with us. And no, you don't need to be in the video if you're proud of your EV but rather shy. Well, government policies usually have good intentions, but all too often end up making matters worse. Good example is the mess that Europe and America are getting into with their tariffs. Well-intentioned, certainly, but more likely to do tremendous long-lasting harm. Well, check out our latest video about tariffs and why they won't work using the link down below. Well, all governments all around the world are becoming increasingly concerned about the extremely high, often illegal levels of toxic fumes, carcinogenic chemicals, and health-damaging gases that are now common in all our cities, causing actual bodily harm to ourselves, our families, our children and our grandchildren, while putting the already overloaded NHS under even more pressure. Added to that is now an overwhelming consensus among climate scientists that our CO2 output has reached dangerous levels, and its continued growth might be reaching a point where it causes an existential threat to our future. But many existing and upcoming policies are now proving to be, at best, a total waste of money, and at worst, actually doing more harm than good. Today, we'll look at benefit in kind incentive and upcoming changes to the EV public charging regulations 2023. Well, a long time ago, the government decided that offering a company car to an employee was in reality an untaxed benefit, and a percentage of it was decided needed to be taxed as if it was salary. So employees getting company cars found they had to pay tax based on the value of that car. When our government decided to help to achieve their climate and pollution targets by incentivising EVs, they simply introduced a new, much lower benefit in kind tax rate for EVs that was massively favourable to both the employers offering them and the employees driving them. Well, before anyone out there complains about incentives to EV drivers, they should be aware that benefit in kind for luxury petrol and diesel cars is still in existence, meaning this government is subsidising right now luxury petrol and diesel company cars, just to a lesser degree than for EVs. Are you happy that a big gas-guzzling Range Rover or SUV driver is being subsidised from the tax that you pay? Well, fair's fair. With many people being very wary about driving a full EV because of serious concerns about range anxiety, which are being lied about and massively overhyped in the headlines of certain media outlets and other interested parties, the companies and employees chose to go down the motor industry's compromise, namely hybrids, both HEVs, hybrids, and PHEVs, plug-in hybrids, and it was the PHEVs that offered the most attractive option to a population that didn't have a complete understanding of how they worked and often didn't get any help or education when they were handed their new PHEV company car. Well, to explain the video, I recently got my hands on a BMW 330e plug-in hybrid electric vehicle and was able to analyse it for myself, including charging it from a variety of sources. So, first of all, why are PHEVs so popular? Well, for many people who cannot charge at home, they simply believe, or they've been brainwashed into thinking, that an EV will not for them. If you can't charge at home, you can't have one. Well, for these people, the PHEV seems to offer the ideal solution. Well, this particular one has a 2-litre 1998cc petrol engine, and it can drive totally on that engine whenever they want. But it also has a 19.5 kilowatt hour battery, and it can also drive on that totally without using the petrol engine. There are restrictions on speed, but they can drive on electric. It's therefore, as advertised, the best of both worlds, because the battery is a fairly hefty size compared to HEVs, and those, by the way, cannot drive on pure electric power. But because of the size of the battery, it needs to be charged by plugging it in. And here the first fly in the ointment launches at you. If people buy, lease, or the company supplies a PHEV, it is most likely that they cannot charge at home. Even if they can, 99% of people will not have a suitable charger or power supply to be able to just drive it home and charge it from home. So first choice, you pay an electrician to install a suitable external weatherproof socket on the outside. Then you buy a portable home charger. It's about 300 quid gone. In reality, most people don't bother. So, can they charge at a public charger? Yes. And the spec states 2.5 hours charging time, 0% to 100%. But on the 330e I got hold of, the socket is a Type 2. Check your socket. For DC rapid charging, you need a CCS2 socket, and that's the one with the 2 DC pins at the bottom. This doesn't have them. This is a Type 2. And I know of no Type 2 plugs that DC rapid charge. This car is restricted to AC charging, and the dashboard also states a maximum permissible current of 16 amps. So 16 times 240 gives us 3.84 kilowatts. And 19.5 kilowatt hours divided by 3.84 is 5.078 hours. Yet the spec says 2.5 hours from 0 to 100%. How does that work? Anyway, when I plugged it into a portable charger, and that was plugged into a 3-pin 13 amp socket, it automatically defaults to 10 amps. And that's the maximum that these should be used at for extended periods of time. That gives 2.4 kilowatts maximum speed if you plug it into a 13 amp socket. They all have a 13 amp plug. If you can manually switch it up to the maximum, and that on the portable charger I use is set at 16 amps, but when you use a plug, it maxes out at 13 amps. Now, the anomalies, or maybe just lies, are already screaming out at me. Plugged into a portable charger with 10 amps selected, this quotes a time of 6 hours on the car dashboard. Definitely not 2.5 hours. Then plugged into my 7 kilowatt 32 amp wall mounted home charger, the car defaulted to the 16 amps and the time 7% to 100% was 4 hours. But it was worth it because, of course, the WLT MPG is quoted as 313.9 miles per gallon. Whoa! So maybe we can forgive them a bit of a mistake on charging time if we can get 313.9 miles per gallon. But there are two problems. First, as stated in the BMW specs, that is with both a full battery and a full petrol tank. If the battery is empty, as this one was when it was handed to me, well, not totally empty, the battery management system will never allow it to be totally flat. That actually does an awful lot of damage. This one seems to drop down to about 5% and then just stay there. But without the battery, the stated miles per gallon is, wait for it, not 313.9, but 37.7 to 38.7. And this one, which has had a flat battery since new, it's never been charged, let alone charged up to 100%. So this PHEV is quoted at 313.9 miles per gallon, but with a flat battery is expected to do about 38. And in fact, this one on the dashboard is displaying an average of 30 miles per gallon from new. That's less than 10%. That's less than 10% of the quoted expected range. So why not just charge it as public fast charger? Well, it's just the time. See, flat out at 16 amps, whatever else the charger is capable of providing, you will need to plug it in for a minimum of 3 or 4 hours. Now, if you think EVs are bad with a typical charging time on DC of about 40-45 minutes, you just try 4 hours. And you have to pay for it. Most people don't bother. Most people do not have an external weatherproof socket. Most people will not spend £1,000 on a 7 kilowatt wall mounted home charger for such a small battery. I certainly wouldn't. So the problem here is that the majority of people who buy or are handed a PHEV cannot actually charge it at home, and many of those that can just don't bother. First of all, it will dramatically increase your electricity bill. You think your electricity bill is dear now, try plugging in your PHEV every night and burning through 10 or 15 kilowatt hours at the standard variable tariff of 25 pence per kilowatt hour. And then there's a time, what if it's raining? You just get fed up with it. So the sad reality is that the vast majority of PHEVs never actually run on batteries, ever. But if you did, you only get a stated range of 58 to 60 miles, and we all know how realistic those figures are. In reality, you'll get maybe 30 or 40 miles maximum in normal use. Well, PHEVs are actually pretty good in theory. Not very good, but pretty good, because that 313.9 miles per gallon is just a pipe dream, or it's produced by someone who was definitely smoking a pipe and it didn't have tobacco in it. If the owner switches their tariff to a cheap overnight rate and the car never does more than 30 miles per gallon and it's plugged in every single night without fail and it's never used for a long journey like a holiday, then they sort of make sense. But hang on. If you only ever do less than 30 miles a day and you never do a long journey and you plug it in every single night, then why not get a full EV? There's not one car in existence that only does 30 miles on a full charge. The very worst you're likely to find is about 100 miles. You don't even have to plug it in every night. So the majority of PHEVs are driving around on full petrol all the time and most never get charged at all. So why do it? Well, that's a really simple one. For many people, they actually have no choice. For a company car, the financial incentive for the employer is simply staggering. Just one example for an employee on the top tax rate of 45% is needed here. If you salary sacrifice a lease deal with an Audi Q8 e-tron full electric luxury car, you will save over £9,973 over a year than if you'd chose an Audi Q8 petrol, equally luxurious. There are equal savings for the employer. His contribution is far less, but he gets staggering brownie points, or should that be green points, for being a caring, considerate employer and helping the planet go green by forcing his reluctant employees to drive electric, and the cheapest electric vehicle he can find turns out to be a PHEV. Well, many people driving around in PHEVs had no choice. I've met countless people who not only were forced into a PHEV, that's your company car, take it or leave it, occasionally a full EV, but they get absolutely zero tuition or education as to what you could and indeed should be doing. You probably do get an all-star petrol credit card for filling up your petrol tank, but nothing on the EV side. So the government is very heavily subsidising salary sacrifice deals and benefit in kind for the majority of drivers who drive around on petrol all the time. I've met many people who tried, then gave up charging their PHEV. It was just too much hassle. Just use the company credit card and put it on petrol. And they've driven tens of thousands of miles on pure petrol. Is the government even aware of this? Do they really believe it's encouraging people to drive electric? My experience says very firmly they've got no idea. Well, now the government's getting it wrong. They've turned their attention to the public EV charging infrastructure as regulated by the Public Charge Point Regulations 2023. Well, prior to this regulation, aided by unrestricted government subsidies, CPOs, these are charge point operators or charging networks, were largely unregulated, a free-for-all, resulting in a horrendous growth of cheap and nasty EV chargers that rarely were maintained or repaired, leaving the UK charging network in quite a dire state. The 2023 Act tried to correct this by specifying minimum levels of reliability and a simplification of payment methods by specifying that all chargers over 8 kilowatts need to have a contactless payment method. No apps, no RFID, no memberships or anything, just contactless. This regulation comes into force on the 24th of November. Governments offered generous incentives to Tesla in the early days, who at the time had the largest, most powerful, cheapest and most reliable ultra-rapid charging network in the world, and were more than delighted to waive the contactless limitation for Tesla because all their early chargers, the V2 and the V3 chargers, have no screen or contactless terminal. Governments were thus able to offer the general public access to many hundreds of chargers virtually overnight. Well, since then, the Tesla supercharging network that's open to all other CCS2 EVs has grown, and it's approaching 1,000 individual bays today. Drivers simply operate them via a free app. However, that waiver is now in question from the 24th of November. The UK government must now decide whether to extend the waiver and therefore leave the best part of 1,000 of the best, most reliable and cheapest ultra-rapid chargers in the UK out there open to non-Tesla drivers, despite not having a contactless terminal, or whether to remove the waiver, in which case they will all be removed from public use by default and once again be restricted exclusively to Tesla owners. Now, talk to Tesla owners, many of them would welcome not having to share their superchargers, and they see that as a benefit. But to non-Tesla drivers, this could end up a catastrophe. Because Tesla open to all superchargers are considerably cheaper than all other public chargers, often less than half price, those other CPUs have recently had to start reducing their prices as EV drivers avoided using them at the extortionate higher prices and started using the Tesla open to all instead. If those hundreds of V2 and V3 chargers are banned from being available to non-Tesla drivers because of the lack of contactless terminal, there is likely to be an immediate reaction by the other CPOs. Many are just likely to immediately increase prices again. No competition. In that case, their policy will drive more buyers to select Teslas, which will have a huge impact on the European EV manufacturers like VW, BMW and many others, who are already suffering badly from falling sales and huge financial losses on all EVs that they manage to sell. Now, not all Tesla superchargers are affected. For the last year or so, Tesla's been installing V4 chargers, which do indeed have screens and contactless payment terminals. In theory, these will not be affected, but Tesla may well have a very different view. After bending over backwards to make a new V4 charger with longer cable, which Teslas don't need, and LCD screens, which Teslas don't need, and contactless terminals, which Teslas don't need, they might well not be inclined to bow down to crazy government policies that specifically hurt Tesla and no others. Time will tell. Well, additionally, the regulation applies to public chargers above 8 kilowatts. These are fast chargers. Now, during our filming session at Aldi in Preston, where we met Gary, he informed us that while he used to get 11 kilowatts and on occasions 22 kilowatts from Aldi and other supermarket fast chargers, recently he's found he's getting less than 7 kilowatts, actually quoted 6.6 at one of them. Now, it could be coincidence, but it could also be a deliberate policy. Aldi have installed fast chargers recently in this new store, and they do not have contactless payment terminals, or at least ones that work. Now, I met the site manager while it was being built. He showed me and I filmed the 4 brand new chargers still in boxes that were to be installed, and they were definitely rated at 22 kilowatts. Now, instead of activating the contactless terminals, if fitted, or installing brand new chargers that comply with the 24th of November deadline, it could be seen as easier, cheaper and less hassle to Aldi to just drop the output of those existing fast chargers to below the 8 kilowatt limit, and they can then just ignore the regulations. They'll be out of the scope of the 2023 regulations, and Lidl can just happily neglect them. Doesn't matter if they break down, they're not regulated. Occam's razor is an oft-quoted philosophy that states, with multiple explanations to a problem, the simplest is usually correct. Well, I leave that decision up to you. Please leave your comments down below. Well, similarly, the government appears to be really reluctant to take on or encourage or allow Ofgem to flex their muscles and get a grip on the delays in connecting new EV charger installations into the national grid. Many I've filmed have taken in excess of a year. Now, along they've also got a massive big backlog of solar PV and offshore wind farms, all finished but not yet connected. And some of them that turn out to be at the back of the queue are facing delays of more than a decade. Again, total lack of understanding of the problem and the consequences of their policies. Why on earth subsidise the solar PV and offshore wind farms when they face such huge delays in coming online? Some might think this is a deliberate policy, possibly to make their much hyped proposed nuclear power stations look much more attractive for outside investors. Well, the loss of the Tesla V2 and V3 superchargers and a cheaper option they offer to thousands of non-Tesla EV drivers will have a negative impact on EV adoption. Won't stop it, it will slow it. And the government is very actively trying to promote EVs. Are they aware that they have contradictory policies? Probably not. Well, this time there seems to be no definitive answer as to whether or not the Tesla V2 or the V3 superchargers that are currently open to all will be available to non-Tesla drivers after the 24th of November. If it is clarified before then, I'll try immediately to let all my viewers know. If you want to be notified as to any future changes, then please subscribe so you don't miss this announcement. If you have any comments of your own on this subject, then please leave them down below. We do try to read them all, but we do get so many, we can't read each one, and we certainly can't offer individual answers to everyone. By the way, if anyone wants individual replies, access to live online chat sessions, please consider becoming a Patreon member. Details for that are down below. So is EV public charging heading towards the catastrophe shambles that is the HS2, the high-speed railway? That's in absolute tatters. And Crossrail Rail, which is years overdue and £3 billion overspent. Is it even fully open today? Well, it makes me wonder what our MPs do all day. If you were the Transport Secretary or Minister, would you talk to the various experts yourself? Would you ask them what they needed and how best that could work? You can always make up your own mind, but at least talk to the experts. I've got my doubts. Still amazes me that every year the Health Secretary announces, oh my goodness, there's a massive increase in hospital admissions because it's winter. Let me give you a clue. We have a winter every single year, and we will do, hopefully, for the foreseeable future. It is not a surprise, or at least it shouldn't be. If it does generally come as a surprise, I think maybe a change of career is called for. Well, thanks very much for watching. I'm Dave. Now, as always, if you like this video, please click the like button. And if you want to see more, please subscribe. And a massive thank you to all my viewers, commenters, subscribers, and Patreon members. Without you, this channel would not exist. I'm Dave.